Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter, and today I'm going to show you how I painted this beautiful snow troll from the War of the Rohirrim movie. It's a massive miniature. I really love the details on it, and even though he played only a small part in the movie, he is a nice addition to your armies, and I really enjoyed painting him. So I'm going to show you how I did it. First, I based the model, I assembled the model and put some modeling sand on the bottom just to not to have to do it afterwards. And yeah, well, I'm going to show you how I painted it. I gave it a white primer as it's mostly a bright miniature with some dark areas. I usually tend to go for a bright undertone. But some parts I painted dark immediately, and I started by doing so with Black Templar. Black Templar is a contrast paint which is a bit shiny through, so it gives a nice variation in color and shows some of the previous colors shining through. And what I did here is painted all of the scaled areas. There's part where the skin is showing, and this is the scale, so it's mainly the back of its arms, the side of the legs. And after it dried, I gave it a dry brush with Dark Reaper. Just go over it and apply some tone. Dark Reaper has a bluish gray tone, so that's a nice addition to the ice troll. We want to have some blue tones in there. So to brighten it up, I'm using Thunderhawk Blue on the scales on his arm, the spiky parts, so to say. I'm giving most of the scales this color, leave some of the darker parts showing in the bottom and on the back. And I'm using the same color as I'm dry brushing the legs, which have some smaller scales. Now we're going to highlight those with Fenrisian Gray, and for this I'm sticking to the very edges of these spiky thingies. What's there a name for this? I don't know. And I'm going to give it some sharpness by doing so. So use the side of your brush to paint some fine lines here and there. And it creates some extra edginess, some sharpness to these spikes. To paint this model, it takes a lot of time because there is plenty of detail and we want to use it to its fullest. So that's what I'm going to try and show you here. And this part is the most time-consuming part. Fenrisian Gray on the scales, and yes, I painted every scale, the edges of it, and it's a really time-consuming part, but it's really beautiful if it works out. So take your time, please allow yourself to do this, because this is what's going to make this model look amazing. So in the end you have something like this, and you can see here all the scales are painted and have a dark inside and a bright outside. Next I'm using Rock Art Flash for the skin tone, and you might think this is way too bright, way too man flesh looking, but we're gonna tone it down. But I want to have some of those warm skin tones underneath. So I'm painting these on the belly, the face, the hands, the inside of the legs, basically everything we haven't painted so far except for the horns and armor. Next I'm washing it with Nuln Oil, and this might seem a little strong, but we're going to use some dry brush techniques afterwards to tone it down a little bit, and I want the contrast to be as great as possible. You can use Agrax Earth Shade or Reichland Flesh Shade or whatever you want, but I went for a really dark one. And also because the Nuln Oil kind of blends together the dark areas we painted before. And of course we're going to do more of that in the future of our process. Trust the process. It's gonna turn out beautiful, promise. First, dry brush layer of Palette Witch Flesh. It's a snow troll. We want it to be white, so we're gonna brighten it up a lot. And first layer we're going to do with dry brushing. And afterwards we're going to blend those colors together. But first we want to have as much contrast as possible. Next I'm mixing the palette witch flesh with some lamium medium. What you're doing here is you're kind of creating a wash of your paint. And because we dry brushed it before, we have some nice fine detail lines on the most prominent features, and we're gonna kind of blend those colors together with this wash. You might have to go over it 2 or maybe even 3 times to get a nice smooth effect. You want the sharpness to be dulled down a little bit. Now we're gonna do the same with Abaddon Black and Lamium Medium to blend those 2 colors together. So it's a thinned down version, and we're going to paint that in the areas where the dark skin and the bright skin connect. And with doing so, you get a nice transition between the dark and bright areas. While doing this, you have to keep in mind that you pull back the paint towards the darkest area. So when using a dark paint, you pull it towards the dark area so that the part where you start is brightest. And you get the beautiful transition we're looking for. Next, Sigvold Burgundy and Abaddon Black I mixed together to create the inside of the mouth. It's kind of a purpley look I'm going for. Let it look something like this. You can use different kinds of purple and mix it with black if you want. I'm using some Demonette hide to paint in the tongue. Because it's a nice and chilly look, I would normally use maybe Screamer Pink or something like that for the tongue, but I wanted it to look colder, and I think I achieved it with this color. We're going to be highlighting it with some palette witch flesh to the mix and give it a nice edge highlight. And also do the gums above and below the teeth. Now for the teeth itself, I'm using rock hard flesh as a nice dark bone look. And I'm highlighting those with palette witch flesh to create some extra sharpness. So focus on the bottom parts, the sharp parts of the teeth. Next, the beard. I'm using White Scar. This is a snow troll in the end, so I wanted it to have a unique appearance by a really, really, really white beard. And there's nothing more white than White Scar. So give it a nice coat. And afterwards we continue on the eyes, Ienden Yellow. It's a nice yellowy look. If you use it more than once, it turns more orange. So I think I gave it about 2 coats. So we have something in between. And for the pupils I'm using Abaddon Black, and I gave it half a circle. I made the bottom half round on the top of the eye, so he looks a bit menacing. I don't know if it's really visible, but I hope you get the idea. So you use a half circle on top of the eye. With these large models you have the room to create something like this. Now we have a snow troll, so Briar Queen Chill is a color I'm not really using a lot, but when painting a snow troll, let's make him chilly, right? It's a nice blue hue when mixed with some contrast medium, and I painted it all over the bright skin, just to give it a bit more of a chilly look, and I really loved how this effect turned out. I gave it about 2 coats. You let that dry in between, and it adds just that little extra detail that you want with these big models. Then some Nuln Oil in a very, very thinned down version for the beard, because I wanted to keep it nice and bright, and when applying too much Nuln Oil it tends to get very dark. Now you can use some Apothecary White if you have it as well. For the horns, I'm using Corvus Black. It's a nice bluish black and matte black, which really complements to the rest of the colors. I painted the horns with this color, but also the fingernails and the toenails. Now to highlight this, I'm using Ulthian Grey, and I use a dry brush to achieve this effect. And when you imagine the fingernails to be in a vertical position, use your brush horizontally, so brush against the direction of the fingernails, because there are some nice fine details in there that you can pick out this way. And I also used it on the horns, and you see the same effect here. So when you encounter a horizontal line, hold your brush vertically, so against the lines, to create these nice lines without covering the entire model with this bright color. Next is the cloth Deathcore Drab mixed with some Abaddon Black, as we're going for a dark undertone. And I used the same colors on Shank and Rot, which I painted before, and I wanted those three to kind of fit together, so I gave him the same look. I'm highlighting it with some pure Deathcore Drab. Leave some of those darker areas shining through. And next we're going to be adding Rohirrim Camo to the Deathcore Drab for our highlight stages. And I'm focusing on the raised areas, the parts that would normally catch the most light, the edges of the cloth, just to define them a little bit more. There is a lot of fine lining here and there, a lot of fringes, a lot of edges and corners on this cloth, even above and below the belt. And what I'm doing here is painting some vertical lines on the bottom, front and back, to make it look worn. It looks like it's a bit torn, a bit, well, a worn piece of cloth. So it's a nice extra effect. I'm keep adding Rohirrim Camo to the mix to brightening it up step by step. And in the end, I'm using pure Rohirrim Camo for the final highlight. You get a nice build-up in color. Then the leather straps, dried bark. I want them to be nice and bright because we have a dark model, and it's nice to have some color here and there. So the straps are around his waist, a little bit below the beard, the shoulder, of course, front and back. And as you can see here, I forgot the belt around his waist. Even I made mistakes, plenty of them. So I'm highlighting it with some Baneblade Brown. And what I did here is give it an edge highlight by holding my brush sideways to the edge. And what you can do then is paint in some extra details, some scratches, by pulling your brush against the direction of the belt. So you can see me doing here, pulling some details in it, and it gives this nice scratchy look. It looks a bit worn. Then the metal parts I painted with Leadbelcher, which is his shoulder piece, the chains around his wrists, and the belt buckle and the buckle holding the leather straps together on his chest. Be very careful not to touch the painted skin before. Then some Agrax Earthshade to give it a rusty look on all of the metal. And to create some extra shades, I'm using Nuln Oil. Now you let that dry, and in the meanwhile I focused on the base, and for that I used Garagax Sewer. I'm not really paying a lot of attention to the base because I'm going to cover most of it with snow, but you want to have some nice colors there, right? For the sharpness of the metal, I'm turning to Stormhost Silver and pick out the spiky parts, some sharp edges here and there. You can use lead belcher again if you want it to be less bright. And with a dry brush, I'm painting some scratches. I make it look a little bit more worn. When you do this on the arms and the smaller pieces, make sure to use a small brush because you do not want any metal on the painted areas. Dried bark for the base, highlighting it with some Karak stone. Again, it's not going to be really visible, but the parts that are shining through, you want them to look good. And I'm giving it an extreme highlight with Palette Witch Flesh. Now I'm gonna add some extra details and build some rocks out of cork. I'm just pulling off some parts of the cork to make it edgy and not really that even. I glued some parts together and it looks really rocky, doesn't it? Now I'm gluing some rocks here and there to the base just to make it a little bit more interesting. And again, we're going to be adding snow in the end, and I want to cover some of those rocks with snow so it's not really flat. So I'm just gluing some rocks here and there. It's a really easy method. I'm painting it with Mechanicus Standard Gray. And then highlighted it by using a dry brush of Grey Seer. You can add some extra sharpness with a brush if you want, but this usually does the job. Next, some Valhallan Blizzard, which is a Citadel technical paint. There's a lot of ways to create snow, but this is a very easy way, and I like the finished effect of this technical paint. You just slap it on like this with, I don't know what this device is called, like a modeling stick or whatever. You just put it on, dab it, make sure that it's not flat because snow never is, so put some holes in it. You can use a toothpick if you want, just to make it uneven. And once this has dried, we have a finished snow troll. I really, really love the end result of this guy. He looks amazing, he looks menacing, he's big, he is colorful, but still stylishly snowy, icy, chilly looking. So I hope this was of any use to you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and consider subscribing to the channel because I'm making a lot of these videos and your support means a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching again, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!